All righty, peeps. We are redoing the upper extremity lab here because the one I recorded earlier today came in at 46 minutes and it was slightly higher resolution. And that means increased memory demands and increased the storage space. And I exceeded my allotment that I'm able to upload to Canvas. So we have to redo this with more bones and less talk. So upper extremity, known as the arm, is going to be anchored to the pectoral girdle. So I got this real live dead plastic skeleton here, and our pectoral girdle will consist of collarbone, rotate this around, scapula, shoulder blade, which is of course not really attached to the ribs with screws in real life, but rather it floats freely over the rib cage there. Okay, so that's kind of that. The scapula, there's a lot to say about it. Let's go ahead and deal with that bone very specifically. Okay, so a shoulder blade, and I need to dim there we go. I got this lighting coming in from the side, which allows me to show the three-dimensionality of everything better. This rather flat, curved, triangular shaped bone or shoulder blade. First of all, let's deal with the parts, the ends. We have this broad curve that faces medially towards the vertebral column. And as such, it's called the vertebral border or medial border. And then we have this inwardly curved section that faces laterally to the arm. It's been referred to also as the axillary border. Now we have a superior angle and an inferior angle. And then up above here, you can totally see this space, this little notch here. This is a scapular notch. Blood vessels and nerves pass through there. They need this little cutout in the bone because there's a really big, thick muscle that goes right here called the supraspinatus muscle. Okay, so this is the anterior view. Anterior view, you just have this big, shallow, smooth space here called the I should say the we'll go ahead and call it the subscapular fossa. Okay, let's rotate this around to the back. Now we're looking at the posterior view, characterized by the presence of this really big structure, kind of like a carrying handle here. This is called the spine of the scapula or scapular spine. It starts out kind of rather inauspiciously at the vertebral or medial border, and then it rises higher and higher. And then ultimately it seems to like take off into flight here where it terminates into this acromion process or just straight up acromion. Okay, so spine of the scapula. And again, vertebral or medial border, axillary or lateral border, inferior angle, superior angle. Notch of the scapula is not really visible that much from this angle here, the way I'm holding it. I'd have to rotate it, maybe have more of a top view. So this smooth area below the spine is called the infraspinous fossa. Another term might be subspinous fossa, but infraspinous fossa is, I believe, the term I have on the Canvas word list. Rotate this, so we're now looking down at it from the top, and we have a supraspinous, supra meaning above, a supraspinous fossa. Okay, let's just rotate this and view it straight laterally from the side. So the spine of the scapula gives rise to the acromion process posteriorly, and you can feel this on your shoulder as kind of like that bony portion above your shoulder, where your arm is going to insert, and you got that shoulder muscle, the deltoid muscle originating here in part. We have a smaller little projection, kind of looks like, it's called a coracoid process Coracus being Latin for crow. So whoever calls it this, apparently they thought it looked like a crow's beak. And I'm kind of having a hard time with that, visualizing that as a crow's beak on this particular specimen, but that's what they call it. And this crow's beak or coracoid process is on the anterior front side of this. Now, and of course, again, supraspinous fossa in between. Let's look at this from the lateral viewpoint again and totally check out this depression here, this oval egg-shaped depression, avocado-shaped depression. There's something that kind of goes here. It's called the head of the humerus bone. And we have our glenohumeral joint right there. Semicircular head of the humerus fits beautifully in this depression. This depression, you can call it a glenoid fossa or glenoid cavity. Either term is fine with me. And if we were to rotate this, so now we're viewing it, we're looking straight up. So this is an inferior view of the scapula. You see this rough textured bony pedestal that holds up this flat, polished, smooth surface? This rough textured bony pedestal that you can see because I'm covering the rest of it with my fingers, that is the glenoid process. Off to one side of this glenoid process, there's a rather lumpy part sticking out. Let's see if I can rotate this. There we go. Let's focus the camera as sharp as is humanly possible here. This is called an infraglenoid tubercle. This is an important site of attachment, or should I say origination, for the triceps muscle. Above this, we have a supraglenoid tubercle for the biceps brachii muscle, but the problem is, or one of the heads, but the problem is I did not put that on the Canvas word list. It does show up in the muscle section of this course when we talk about the origins and insertions of the biceps brachii and triceps brachii. So you now know that, oh, okay, a supraglenoid tubercle is right here. Okay, I think we got everything for the scapula that's on the word list. There's actually more to say about it, but we'll leave it at that. Next up, so this is the front, this is the back. We have a humerus. Front, back. Head always curves medially. This is the correct upper arm bone, or I don't care what they call this, it's not funny, the humerus, to articulate with this scapula. So the humerus, like the femur, it has this big, prominent, rounded hemispherical head. And when I was changing, here we go. I need to put my glasses on so I can see the flat screen, make sure everything's focused on that screen there. I look at my laptop screen, it's not as high resolution as the monitor on the wall because I haven't set it. My laptop's old now, like 3 years old, and in gaming platforms, it might as well be 1,000 years old. So I've dialed down the video clarity to improve gameplay. Anyway, so you got this rounded hemispherical head. That is the head of the humerus. Now, can you make out this line right here? We can follow this line all the way around the entire circumference of the head. Well, this line here, there we go, get it to show up at its best here with the light and shadow. This is called the anatomical neck of the humerus. So I'm trying to highlight it, and it's a little bit tricky here with the lighting situation. Down here is what's called the surgical neck of the humerus. Well, the anatomical neck is where the epiphyseal line, the growth plate, is. The surgical neck is called the surgical neck down here because this is a very frequent site of bone fracture for this bone. I'm guessing it has something to do with us guys having a proclivity to install washing machines, dryers, refrigerators, stoves, and cabinetry and hot water heaters by ramming against it with our shoulder. And oftentimes you'll get a fracture there. and maybe contact sports, football, hockey, MMA, getting someone ramming into you with their shoulder, blading, whatever. Okay, so that's the surgical neck. Now, head always faces medially. We have on this bone, I'm going to bring this up and then rotate it this way, and then adjust the focus on the camera for maximum sharpness up close and personal. You see this little lump right here, and you see this bigger lump right here. Well, this bigger one, whoops, there we go. This bigger one right here, this is called a greater tubercle of the humerus. And then we have this U-shaped valley here. This is called the intertubercular groove or intertubercular sulcus. And then we have a lesser tubercle. Whoops, make sure I'm doing this correctly. There we go. Lesser tubercle of the humerus. So let's get a darker background there. Greater tubercle, intertubercular groove or sulcus, and lesser tubercle. Now, in your textbooks, multiple textbooks from many publishing companies, in the bone section of the book, this is referred to as the intertubercular groove or intertubercular sulcus. And then in the muscle sections of those same books, a few chapters later, they call it the bicipital groove. So any of those terms is fine by me. Your textbooks are typically written by multiple people capable in their particular area of specialty, and then everything is unified and brought together into a slick, polished, saleable package by an editor. Okay, so the grooves and the tubercles face laterally. The head is oriented medially. So let's rotate this humerus to the lateral side. I don't really want to call it the back side. We'll call it the outside side. So the part of your arm that faces away from the body. And you see this rough textured spot right here. This is called the deltoid tuberosity. This is where the deltoid or shoulder muscle inserts. You toss those kettlebells, this part of this bone is going to get rough textured, increase in density, and grow because, again, muscles pull on bone, and where they do so, the bone grows in that direction, and you get that increase in bone density. Okay, so that's it for the proximal head of the humerus. Let's keep moving down here. Now we got a distal head of the humerus. So this is the posterior end. This is the anterior end, or side, I should say. This is medial. This is lateral. So again, proximally, the head of the humerus faces medially. And if you look at the distal end of the humerus, look at this little projection. It flares out and is very, very prominent medially. Lateral side, not so prominent. So this little bump here, I'm literally lifting up this humerus by this bump. This bump is called the medial epicondyle. And then we have a medial condyle right next to it. Another term for this medial condyle is the trochlea. Well, exactly what happens with the trochlea? This is the ulna, one of the forearm bones. It's going to articulate in that trochlea just so to make an elbow joint. And is this the correct one? Let's see. No, it's actually not the correct one. There we go. Let's see if this is the correct here. Okay, yeah, this is a little bit better here. Okay. Okay, so I just got to put these here for future reference here and get all this other stuff out of my way because there's a lot to say about what's going on here. Okay, so I should say medial epicondyle, medial condyle or trochlea. And then right here, this smooth little spot is the lateral condyle also known as the capitulum. Rotate this around, and we have a lateral epicondyle. Okay, if you look at this thing, it sort of flares out like the neck and head of a cobra snake. You know, you got the skinny little body of the snake, and when they get angry and mad at you, they have these little flaps. The elapids or cobras have these little flaps that they can flare out and look all intimidating and scary. You take a herpetology class and you know what kind of venom cobras and elapids have, you're going to respect their opinions big time and wisely retreat if a snake does this to you. So the sides of the neck of the snake here, if you imagine this is like the head of a cobra hissing at you, these are called supracondylar ridges. Once again, they're important because a lot of the muscles that act on a forearm and whatnot originate here. And some can even go beyond acting on a forearm and actually act on the hands, cause hand movement flexion. Okay, so again, this prominent part is medial. So that means this is a medial supracondylar ridge. And this less prominent part is lateral. So we have a lateral supracondylar ridge. This little depression in the center is called the coronoid fossa. The coronoid fossa always faces the front or anterior. Then we have an olecranon or olecranon fossa in the back, facing posteriorly. Let's stick a ulna on here. So in order to get full range of movement of your elbow, in order to completely extend your arm and have it hanging down at your sides without a whole lot of issues, we need a place to put this bony protuberance of one of the forearm bones. This is called the olecranon process of the ulna. And in order to fully extend your arm, you gotta fit this olecranon process of the ulna into the olecranon fossa of the humerus. Okay, that's extension. Let's flex, bro. So now we're flexing. In order to bend your arm to this degree or flex your elbow joint to this degree, you need a place to put this sharp bony ridge right here called the coronoid process of the ulna. And when you do that, that's going to fit very nicely into the coronoid fossa of the ulna. So coronoid fossa anterior, olecranon posterior. Okay, let me just add one more bone here. There we go. I got a proper righteous radius. So now we have our humero-ulnar joint, our elbow joint. Okay, and as you remember from biomechanics lecture, this articulation figured prominently in an example of a third-class levering system. Okay, so let's deal with the forearm bones now. Ulna first. Proximal end of the ulna. So you have this big U-shaped notch right here. This big U-shaped notch, you can call it the trochlear notch. You can also call it the semilunar notch because it's semilunar, half moon shaped. You have a part of your ulna that you use to find furniture and doorknobs and stuff you didn't know is behind you. And that's called the olecranon process. You bang that good and hard, you might feel that tingling sensation. Okay, rotate this to the side, and we have our coronoid process, further distally located from that. We rotate this around to this side, olecranon, trochlear notch or semilunar notch, coronoid process, and look at this curious little rectangle right here in shadow. This is called a radial notch. What's going to fit in this radial notch is the proximal head of the radius. They'll sort of rotate against each other like that. Okay, that's it for the proximal portion of the ulna. Shaft, however, notice this sharp edge right here. Light on one side, shadow on the other, and this line here indicates, ooh, that's a sharp ridge. We don't see that as prominently on the other sides of this bone as we rotate it around. So this sharp knife edge ridge here, this is called the interosseous border or interosseous crest. And I talked about that when I talked about a syndesmosis type of a fibrous joint, a radio-ulnar joint being the example. Okay, distal end of the ulna. We have here a little thing sticking out. This is called the medial styloid process. You may also call it the ulnar styloid process. Either term is fine with me. And then we have this smooth, rounded condyle here. You can basically call this the distal head of the ulna. This is going to fit into the radius, this smooth front here. Okay, so before we go any further, let's go ahead and put a radius and an ulna together. Head of the radius here fits in that radial notch beautifully. Interosseous borders, interosseous crests of both bones face each other. And now we have the head of the ulna, distal head, fitting into this shallow depression in the radius. So we have the two bones of our forearm, how they fit together and sort of rotate around each other with very limited movement. Let's deal with the radius now. Okay, so proximally, I already talked about the head of the radius here. This big bump is the attachment site of what's called a brachialis muscle, a major prime mover in elbow flexion of your arm at the elbow joint. If you curl weights, palms up, you're going to work out your biceps or guns. If you curl weights, palms down or to the side, you'll give the brachialis muscle a bit of a workout. Okay, so that's the radial tuberosity. We got what is that truck doing coming down the street this hour? We have a nice knife edge ridge here, light and shadow, interosseous crest. And then if we look at this triangular shaped area in shadow, that is the ulnar notch of the radius. So the head of the ulna will fit into that beautifully. Then we have the distal head of the radius, this big expanded triangular portion. And we have this little nubbin or peak right at the top here. This little peak here is called the radial styloid process. You may also call it the lateral styloid process. If you fall off a skateboard and you use your outstretched hands to break your fall on the concrete, very likely this could break. It happens so often that a fracture of the radial styloid process is referred to as Coll's fracture, C-O-L-L-E. And a similar thing happens to skiers on the ankle bone with basically the malleolus. That fractures so much that it's called, not Coll's, Pott's, P-O-T-T is the name of the fellow, Pott's fracture for the ankle. Okay, so that's pretty much it for these forearm bones. I need to articulate them just correctly here because I am about to do something with them. We need to add a hand. So this is how it goes. Whoops, what am I doing here? There we go. That is, make sure I get that absolutely correct. Okay, that is correct. Radius goes to the thumb. Ulna goes to the pinky finger. Let's see, it might be a little too dim in the house here. Okay, good, this is good. So remember, everything you study has to be in anatomical position. So anatomical position, palms face forward, thumbs are lateral, pinky finger is medial. So we have ulna medially, radius laterally, thumb lateral, pinky finger medial. Okay, so that's anatomical position right there. And you have to mentally put the specimens in anatomical position in order to orient things properly. So how did I remember this? I can make a circle. I can trace a circle with my thumb. Circles have a radius. It's 1/2 the diameter of a circle. And the thumb also has a radius. It's right here. So move these out of the way. Let's bring this hand front and center. We are looking at the dorsal surface of a right hand here. So we have carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Let's deal with the carpals real quick here. We kind of have two rows. We sort of have a row at the bottom here, and then we have this row that's more distal at the top. So let's start with the row that's proximal or at the bottom here. So right here, this chair-shaped muscle, this U-shaped muscle, it's called the scaphoid. I'm sorry, not muscle, bone. This is called the scaphoid bone or navicular bone. And then we have a lunate bone right here. And then we have a triquetral bone. And I have to rotate this laterally to the side here. And this little thing I'm using to hold this entire plastic model that's wired together is called the pisiform bone. The pisiform bone is like the patella in the knees in that it's a sesamoid bone that transfers mechanical forces from a muscle group to itself and then through a tendon to other parts of the body. In this case, what we call the hypothenar group, the group of muscles that go to the pinky finger. Okay, so that's it for the first group of carpals. Now, the second group. So again, let's review. Scaphoid or navicular, lunate, triquetral, and then pisiform around the corner. Now, distally, we have this bone, this bone right here, right by the thumb. That's called the trapezium. And then one right next door to it is called the trapezius. And then we have the capitate and hamate. Okay, how are you going to remember that? Trapezium is by the thumb. Trapezius with the rest of us. The other four fingers. The other four fingers or digits are not like the thumb. The thumb acts in opposition to them. It fights against them. It opposes them. We have opposable thumbs. We can do this. So if you're in the group of the fingers, you're with the rest of us. That's where the trapezius is. But the trapezium is by the thumb. Okay, so that only works if you identify with the fingers, I guess, or the other four digits. Now, this bone here, look how tall it is. It's like taller than the other ones, twice as tall. Like a capital letter is twice as tall as a lowercase letter. This is called the capitate bone. And then this other one over here, right here, this little wedge-shaped thing. I guess that's sort of like a wedge of ham, a slice of ham. That's one way to visualize it. Its name is the hamate bone. So trapezium, trapezius, capitate, hamate. Scaphoid, lunate, triquetral bone, roughly triangle shaped, I guess, depending on how you view it, and pisiform. View these from the palmar side. So this is the dorsal aspect of the hand here. Whoops, there we go, proper way. Now we need to flip that around and get the palmar aspect. So the palmar side, okay, what are we looking at here? Where are my landmarks? Is this right here a scaphoid, lunate, triquetral bone, and pisiform bone? Sure is. That means we got the thumb here, and the trapezium is by the thumb, trapezius with the rest of us. Capitate is like a capital letter, twice as tall as its nearest neighbors, which are like lowercase letters. And then we got the hamate bone. Okay, so Those are the carpals. Now, let's just put that dorsal viewpoint again. Metacarpals are numbered. So these are your knuckle bones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First metacarpal, second metacarpal, third metacarpal, fourth metacarpal, fifth metacarpal. On an exam, of course, you'll want to put all the information, a complete answer. So you would say fifth metacarpal instead of just metacarpal. Digits or phalanges. So you'll notice that the thumb only has 2 phalangeal bones, where all the other fingers have 3. The thumb in ancient times got into a big fight with the other 4 fingers because they're always opposing against each other. The thumb is the strongest. It won. You try thumb wrestling with someone else where they're just using a pinky finger, you're going to raffle stomp them. Ring finger, raffle stomp. Middle finger, easy. And even index finger, you can say, go away, you try-hard noob. Thumbs are strong. So they won the fight, but they took casualties. They suffered a grievous injury. They lost their middle phalange. So with the thumb, we only have proximal phalange 1 and distal phalange 1. With our index finger, proximal phalange 2, middle phalange 2. There is no middle phalange 1. It doesn't exist. And then distal phalange 2. So proximal, middle, and distal phalange 2. Middle finger, proximal phalange 3, middle phalange 3, distal phalange 3. Ring finger, proximal phalange 4, middle phalange 4, distal phalange 4, and pinky pie finger. Proximal phalange 1, proximal phalange 5, middle phalange 5, distal phalange 5. Okay, so I will now stop recording. We got through all of these bones of the upper extremity and their features on the Canvas word list here. Stop recording here to